Dax, what's happening, man? Thank you for joining today. I'm glad we could do this. And this whole pandemic has created a lot of different situations for a lot of companies. And I know we talked and we thought it would be interesting for people to see what a company of this size, how we've sort of dealt with this pandemic and the restrictions and the troubles and the bright spots and whatnot, and have a look under the hood of Triangle. So I'm glad we
Yeah,
could do this.
yeah, very good. Thanks, Larry. It's good to see you.
Good to
So,
see you as well. You're looking good. You had a week off like the rest of us.
yeah, it was nice. We closed for the week, give everybody a chance to recharge their batteries a little bit. As an essential business, we have been open the entire time, and the cumulative effect of being out and about and coming into the office and dealing with the changes to how we have to operate just kind of put some stress on the entire organization. So I felt it was important to give everybody a little bit of a break, and they certainly appreciated it.
Were you able to unplug for the whole time or no?
For the most part, yeah, I had to make an effort to do that. I did do a little bit of catching up work, but I tried my best to just completely unplug. And it's different for taking vacation relative to actually being closed. When I'm on vacation, I'm still on my computer, I'm still on my phone, I'm still keeping up with what's going on, but not having anybody in the office kind of doesn't allow for that to happen. So there was some customer interaction, but that was about it.
Right. Cool. So I thought we would start, by giving folks a sense of where we were back in February in terms of the last several years. There's been a lot of growth, a lot of change at Triangle, some good, some bad. And we don't have to get into all of that, but maybe if we can look at where everything was in February, and in particular, what was on the road ahead for 2020 for Triangle, and where were we going at that point before all
Yeah.
this went down?
Coming off of 2019, which was our best year ever from a sales and a bottom line perspective, we had a lot of great momentum coming into 2020. We had some challenges ahead of us with some legacy business that was kind of moving out, but we really felt like we had a great plan and a really strong year ahead of us, really solid order book. So, we had a lot of great initiatives. As you know, we went live with our new ERP system last year. So we were getting more into the nitty gritty with that, and really being able to leverage that in our business. So there was a lot of great things happening. And then obviously the world changed.
It did. Do you sort of remember those first couple of weeks in March and what, I know it's all kind of a blur now, and what you started to think as you were intaking this information like everybody else?
Yeah, I mean, initially, the first wave for me personally was schools closing for my kids. So, initially that was, we're closing for 2 weeks, and I kind of wasn't. It was probably more in the disbelief category at this point. I was like, really, this is what we're doing? This is, and as time progressed, it seemed like, okay, this is more and more real.
Yeah.
And then I, started getting different communications from customers, pulling back on orders, demand not being there. And the more I started to get engaged with them, started to get more engaged with what was going on from a local, state, and federal government perspective, and just trying to keep up with all the changes. It became very real, very fast.
Yeah, it sure did. Definitely. And as you were taking in that information, I'm sure you were getting a lot of questions from the associates too, as to what's going to happen, how you're going to safeguard us, how are things going to look on a day-to-day basis? Can you talk a little bit about how you were disseminating some of that information throughout the company as well?
Yeah, I was in constant communication. I was sending out, at that point, multiple emails a week to the entire company, just giving them status updates, letting them know what we were doing from an internal standpoint, from an operational standpoint, just trying to keep as much open communication as possible, so people were able to understand what we were doing and able also to make the best decisions for themselves personally, because we didn't really want to put anyone in a situation where they felt uncomfortable, where they didn't feel safe. But at the same time, being considered an essential business, we were going to remain open. And probably at the worst point in time, we were about 60% operational as far as the number of people that were in the office. For those people who could be working from home, we went ahead and let them do that. And then it just sort of unraveled from there.
You mentioned the fact that Triangle was deemed an essential business. What did that mean for you and for Triangle and its employees?
I think it presented some great opportunity, and it also presented some pretty significant challenges. Just the fact that we were able to stay open and continue to function. We went through March and had a very strong month. Actually, we did very well, and then the market started to dictate some slowdowns based on the fact that there weren't elective surgeries happening. So a lot of the demand and the supply chain was basically, the demand had gone away, but the supply chain had continued to move forward. So we were getting kind of this opposite direction as far as the demand and the inventory levels that we were seeing. So at that point, it became more of a conversation with most of our clients to discuss how we were going to slow things down, but make sure that we weren't just completely stopping. So we continued to move forward and had an opportunity to, at the end of this, still have some momentum moving forward. So we weren't going to have layoffs or furloughs. I mean,
Yeah.
that's probably the most important thing for us, was that we've been able to maintain our entire staff, our entire workforce has remained intact, which has been good.
Yeah, I can almost see that, it's sort of a double-edged sword to either be deemed a non-essential and closed totally, or be essential and stay open, but you're then in this gray area for a bit. You don't really know where you stand, unless you are, unless demand is up and you can keep going and everything feels like business as usual. But if it's not, then like you said, you're still in those gray waters of what are we doing and how do we mine through this whole thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that the changes along the way, the different requirements that were being passed down, the executive orders that were coming from the state, we went from not needing to wear masks in the office to needing to wear masks in the office. That was probably one of the biggest changes for us, just in regard to how we were operating from a day to day. The way we work typically naturally social distances. The equipment that we're working on is big, so we're not on top of each other. Meeting spaces needed to be not used in the same way. Have less people in meeting rooms if we could. Obviously, this type of environment with Zoom and all the video conferencing has changed dramatically. But that's doing those things and just continuing to try and keep up with the things that were being passed down from the government were really the things that we were trying to navigate along the way.
Do you think this has shown you guys, or shown you that, well, maybe we don't have to have as many people on site all the time? Maybe we can go into more of a hybrid mode going forward, where people want to work from home because this technology is now relied on so heavily to communicate.
Yeah, I do think that we'll find ourselves working a little bit more from home. We still, our primary business is on the shop floor. That's how we make our money. So to not be on site makes it a little bit more challenging to support the operations of the business. So I don't think that will become a norm for people. I do think that there will be some opportunity to be working from home, but it'll probably be a little bit more sporadic than it will be, sort of the new normal.
And what about in terms of sales and conventions and, doing deals with folks outside of Triangle? I would imagine that maybe this would help cut down some travel or not, maybe. Maybe you don't need the face-to-face as much actually in person because it can be handled this way.
Yeah, I think that this will probably take the place of a lot of the over the phone conference calls. And I like that. I think that that's a great opportunity for us to be doing a little bit more sort of face to face, even though it's through a screen. But I don't think that we'll ever lose that interpersonal relationship development piece where, we're actually meeting. I look forward to getting back to those types of situations where we can travel, we can go to conferences, we can meet face to face, and because that really is where the best development of relationships happens.
Yeah, for sure. We're like 2.5, almost 3 months into this, so it feels like, in a way, a little bit we're coming out of the woods, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future, so we won't go there yet. What kept you up at night mid to late March and April? What were the things that were really weighing on you?
I think just the overall temperament of the staff. How much stress was this causing? What were people coming in and feeling like they were not safe? We always strive to create an environment where people feel that they're safe, that they are cared for, that it is that true family environment that Triangle has been about for 60 plus years now. And that was really the thing that I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose in all of this, is that people felt like they were being forced to come into the office, or that they were feeling disconnected because they weren't able to come into the office. Those were really the things. So it's, again, coming back to just the people.
Yeah. And you kept it open. If you wanted to come in, you could come in. If you wanted to work from home, if you felt safer doing that, you could do that for the most part. But there was definitely a time there where only sort of the essential people who needed to be there were going in.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a good portion of our workforce. I mean, more than half of our staff is direct labor. So they have to come in. Their machines are on the shop floor, and if they're not here, they really can't do their job. So, and like I said before, supporting those folks is the primary focus of our indirect staff. So working from home, again, creates challenges that we need to figure out how to navigate.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between, sort of the design team, operations, and obviously, the guys and gals on the shop floor? And in terms of, in normal times, one of the great things, I know about working on Triangle is there's such a synergy between all of those groups, and being able to just pop down to the floor and have a conversation with someone, find out what's working, find out what's not. How did that shift a bit during this time, these last couple of months?
I do think that there was a lot more communication via phone. That was the one thing that kept us moving forward. Most folks, like I said before, at 60% capacity, we still had most of our people here. And as we got through the challenging times where it was the most restrictive, once we got past that and things started to loosen up a little bit, we had most of our folks in the office and continuing to be able to just do what you said, pop down to the floor, have those spontaneous conversations. The challenges of social distancing and wearing masks have made communication a little bit tougher, but you figure out how to project through a mask, and even though the shop floor can be loud at times, we're doing our best to try and keep that same mentality that we always had.
Yeah. Do you think it affected product realization in any way?
I think just from an opportunity standpoint, none of our clients were focused on product development at that point in time. Really weren't doing any product transfers, so it was more about managing the existing book of business. We are beginning to see that move forward again. We're getting new opportunities coming across, so I'm looking forward to getting back to that, because that's where we grow the business, where we do some really special things, and we get to work collaboratively with our clients. So
Yeah.
we're beginning to get back to that now.
Do you feel like you had more communication with clients during this time than you normally would, just to make sure everybody knows that everything here is okay, everything's still cranking out, or no, is it about the same?
No, I would say it was a little bit more, not as proactive in regard to business development,
Right.
more in regard to the product flow, understanding what the demand is, understanding that we are still operational, and what we're doing to make sure that we remain safe as an organization, and then sharing best practices too. That was something that with a few of our clients was a great opportunity, where they were talking about what they were doing on their shop floors, how they're keeping their employees safe. And when we went back and forth, and that really was in my opinion, some of the better conversations that we had, because it was really, what's in everybody's best interests, and working collaboratively to make sure that we all stay safe.
Yeah. Can you share some of the things you learned there?
It was pretty consistent to what you've been hearing as far as the social distancing, the putting hand sanitizer in more places on the shop floor, masks, just generally speaking, how other companies were managing social distancing in areas where it's really difficult to do that.
Mm.
One of the examples is training. How do you sit down and train somebody on a new operation or a new job, and try and show them from a hands-on perspective, but stay 6 feet apart. So
right.
One of the things that we implemented specifically for that was the face shields. So we have the masks, wearing gloves, but we also have face shields. So it was just one additional layer of protection for our associates.
Nice. And did this show, we've talked before about sort of strengths and weaknesses, and how these types of things can expose those. Talk to me a little bit about that, and how this has shown up, or shown, exposed some of those things, some of those strengths and weaknesses in Triangle.
Certainly having redundancy and capability. And I brought up the training piece before. Not having more associates trained to do specific jobs, and then also having people out where we don't have depth. It quickly showed, and understanding that there were additional challenges from a training perspective made improving that depth even more challenging. So those are the types of things that moving forward, we're going to work much harder to identify and get people trained, so we do have that depth of cross training, so we don't find ourselves in a position where there's only one or two people who can actually do a specific job, and if they're out, then we're stuck.
And what about positives? Were there some strengths that you felt like, oh wow, I'm really glad that we had that in place, or we can as a unit pivot pretty quickly when needed?
Yeah, I think just generally speaking, our culture is so paramount to us, and because of that, we were able to pivot. We were able to do certain things that and do them fairly easily, that I probably wouldn't have thought would have gone as smoothly as they did. So the challenges of moving people around in regard to where there was greater demand versus slower demand, the willingness of people to do whatever it takes to make sure that we continue to move forward, whether that was on site or remotely. People willing to pitch in and help out in areas that aren't normally a part of their day-to-day job. it just was all hands on deck. And I think that's a testament to the culture that we have and the people.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, what about the supply chain? I know across the country and the world, things have gotten shut down, or they're not shipping like they were, or whatnot. How has that affected us?
Some of the things that we get from overseas, we had a hard time getting. Um, but outside of that, raw material wasn't really much of a challenge. We haven't seen much fluctuation in pricing. There hasn't been much. Really, it's just I think more so it's been about the demand. Just not having essential or not having elective surgeries. The demand for our products wasn't there. So, after a bit of time, we realized, okay, we're going to have a period of slow or a period of slowing down, and we really would need to figure out how to manage that in a way that didn't create a situation that we had to reduce our headcount.
And then there's when things start opening back up and surgeries can happen again. There's sort of two sides to it. There's the lull, but then there's going to be probably that rush when things start coming back and people start booking those surgeries again, right? And then keeping up on that end.
Yeah, I've from the beginning of all this, I've been predicting that there would be an uptick in demand that would be a sustained plateau for probably 2 to 3 times as long as their elective surgeries were offline. So I'm anticipating at least a 6-month increase in demand once the inventory levels return back to normal and the product flow continues. So that'll certainly be good for us, and probably some well-needed demand coming out of a few months of being really slow.
Yeah. Are we prepared to handle that situation?
I think so. And, not having the elective surgeries basically go down to nothing, while we, at our worst point, were still operating at, say, 50% capacity. It allowed us to continue to make product just at a much slower pace. So we do have inventory in our finished goods, and we're prepared for the increase in demand and the increase in volume. Like I said before, we haven't reduced our headcount at all. So, we're ready to get back to work and be the best supplier that we can be to the med device industry.
For you personally, what has this, what have you learned as a leader during this time? You've had a lot of things, and let me just say, you've had a lot of things happen over the last few years, and a lot of changes, but nothing like this. I think, this has probably been the biggest, obviously, as it has for most people, for everybody. So, as you take that in consideration with everything else, what have you taken away from this so far? What has it taught you?
I think most importantly, to keep a level head. There were points where tension was very high, and people's stress levels got the best of them. Probably said some things that they didn't mean, whether it was directed at me or towards other associates, and making sure to not be reactive to those things, but to be compassionate and act with some empathy, understanding that everybody is reacting and responding to COVID-19 in different ways. Some of us are a little bit more comfortable. Some of us are a little bit more scared. And there's no right or wrong answer to that. It's how everyone has their own personal reaction. So to really just be able to understand and not rush to judgment, but understand that this is really be compassionate, like I said before. And the other thing, it was for me personally, from a work perspective, most of my work changed completely, going away from business development and then just kind of responding and reacting to all the changes that were happening on a day-to-day basis. Some days I was drinking through a fire hose, and some days I had nothing to do. And it really, there was no way to predict that. It was, okay, well, what's today going to bring? So I had to be prepared for those busy days where things were changing on the fly, and then react when those days were slower, and just trying to keep people motivated.
Yeah. Each day probably felt like a totally new adventure.
Absolutely. It was every day was a new adventure for sure. A roller coaster ride.
Yeah. Triangle's been around a long time in New Jersey. It's part of the community there for a long time, as has your family and your connections and whatnot. And I'm curious to know how much you spoke with some counterparts in the community, community leaders, and tried to glean, information from them as to what was going on, how to adapt and react and whatnot.
I was constant. I was working with folks from CIA&J, working with folks from NJMEP, and then just generally speaking, all my counterparts that I'm friendly with, that I continue to leverage as far as relationships go, and make sure that we're sharing. I have friends in different industries that, from like the government stimulus is a great example. Those rules and things that were coming out and being rolled out and are even today continue to change. But I was talking to friends in the banking industry, friends in the restaurant business, and just trying to make sure that as best that I can, if I'm getting information, I'm passing it along. So everybody's being put in the best situation to be able to weather the storm.
What are there any specifics in there that you can share in terms of what you picked up? Any tidbits that you're like, oh, that's good, I'm going to try that, or we should try that, or, ooh, I don't like what they just did, we're going to stay away from that. Anything in there?
I think the most important thing for us along the way has been taking advantage of the government stimulus, and being in a position to jump on that when we did, and being able to share that with other folks, again, within the industry or in different industries, because that's really what's kept us moving forward in a very difficult time. I don't think that we would have been able to sustain keeping an entire staff, employed through this if we didn't have that stimulus money coming in. So that was probably the most important thing. And for the most part, people were just sharing best practices, and not that this was good or this was bad, but more so this is applicable and this is not. The different industries behave differently. Certain folks that I'm talking to on a weekly basis are purely office. They're in a law firm, or they're in the financial industry, and they're doing things differently from an operational standpoint, but their work is different. So I wouldn't say it was good or bad. It was more so applicable or not applicable.
Right. And the stimulus package helped, as you said. And what other sorts of things will that allow you to be able to do with Triangle?
It's really just going to be able to put us in a position to be stronger on the back end of this, to be able to maintain our workforce, knowing that eventually the volume will come back. Eventually the opportunities will start to come back, and we need to be strong coming out as we were going in, and actually maybe a little bit stronger coming out, understanding that we have new ways of operating, that we can deal with challenges in different ways. And so we're a little bit more resilient today than we were back in February. And I think that that's going to be important for us moving forward.
Speaking of being, resilient today, let's say there is a second surge, as a lot of models are predicting and whatnot, and we all come out and then we've got to shut down again. Are we better prepared for that? Will that be a worse blow than the first time? Have you thought about that? How are you prepared for that?
I think that we'll endure the same. We'll certainly be better prepared because we've taken all the steps that we've taken so far, and we understand how to operate in this sort of environment now. Like I said before, the changes that were happening along the way, we're either doing very little or you're drinking through a fire hose and don't know what you're coming in to expect. I think that that probably will level out and normalize a little bit. So if we do have to come down to a 50 or 60% capacity for a period of time again, because we've gone through the experience once, we'll know better what to do going into it.
Let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's hope that doesn't happen.
I'm really hoping that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
From a work perspective and from a societal perspective, I mean, it's the stress. I mean, look at, all the things that happened over the weekend with the rioting, and, I feel like you've got pent up tension from all of this, the stress of people who are dealing with unemployment, and, it's a very unfortunate situation. But I do think that it was a cumulative effect of all of the things that have been happening over the course of the last few months, which raised everybody's tension and anxiety levels.
Yeah. There's definitely a healing that needs to happen. That's going to take a long time.
Absolutely.
For sure. No. What would you do differently, Dax?
I think I would be more, and I tried my best to be as engaged as possible in communicating, whether that was via email, having virtual meetings, or just being out on the shop floor. I think I did the best that I could, not really understanding and knowing how to navigate what the new normal was. But I do think that the more people understood what was going on, the better they were equipped personally to handle the situation. So, I think that would be something that I would do a little bit different.
It's got to be hard too, because during the day you're trying to run a company with all that entails. And then at night, when you're probably trying to decompress, but you're also trying to catch up on the news just to see what's going on and try to get a hint of maybe what's coming tomorrow. It's a big responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I did my best. After the first couple of weeks, I tried to go directly to the source of information, go right to government websites, read the actual executive orders, read the legislation itself, because you can get wrapped up in the sensationalism of the media very quick, and allow your head to spin on this stuff, and understanding exactly what was being said, and just trying to take that in, as opposed to taking in some of the more dramatic aspects of this whole thing, to be able to make sound decisions that are in the best interests of not just the 200 plus people at Triangle, but their families as well. The Triangle extended family goes well beyond just the 200 plus folks that come to work every day.
Yeah. It's a lot to shoulder, as you said. I mean, there's the clients, everybody's well-being, the associates and whatnot, and their families, and it just keeps sort of building out from there. Do you think more of this sort of crisis handling, crisis prevention, will be more in the fabric of not only Triangle, but companies around the world, and certainly here in the U.S.? It'll be more on the forefront of our minds?
I do. There's always been a business continuity planning aspect of things that we need to do. Dealing with not having power during Superstorm Sandy for 10 days in 2 of our facilities. You do the best you can to be as prepared as possible. But one of the things that I found through the course of this pandemic has been, there's really nothing that we could have done to prepare without knowing what the situation was going to be. And our response to things as they've happened are very individualized. So we're taking everything, rather than trying to put out some sort of blanket procedure that's going to handle everything. We really need to handle it on a case by case basis, because every circumstance is different. We did have 5 folks that ended up contracting the virus at Triangle, none of which contracted it at Triangle, which was very fortunate that we didn't have a wider outbreak. But each one of those cases we needed to handle differently because their circumstances were slightly different. So, we'll be as prepared as we possibly can be, but every circumstance is going to present different challenges.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna bring it home here, because I know we both have a lot of work to get to. So we'll play a little game here, Dax. You are the 3rd generation to take over Triangle. Let's just say there's a 4th, and you're handing over the keys in many years down the road from now. What would, based on this experience and the stuff you've learned in a short time, and what would be your advice as you hand off the keys to the next young CEO?
My
and
advice:
running for the hills is not an option.
My advice would be, just take a deep breath when challenges present themselves, and they will present themselves. You need to be able to operate with a cool head, and just strap in, because it's going to be a roller coaster ride. But it's fun. I have to say that through the course of the first month or so, while I would come home and be completely exhausted and need to try and decompress, there was almost a high that I was getting from dealing with things in a different way, and sort of the whole crisis management aspect of my role and responsibility at Triangle. Something that I really I enjoy, and I don't know if that's just in my DNA, but if it's in my DNA, then it's probably in their DNA as well. So hopefully they'll have what it takes to weather these storms, and know that good times are ahead, and we'll continue to persevere.
And it certainly was in Willie and Neil's DNA, because they got through, and you guys have made it this far.
Absolutely. I don't pretend for 2 seconds that they didn't have their share of challenges along the way. And the challenges, like I said before, are unique, and you deal with them in the best way that you know how. Willie's way was a little bit different than my father's, and my way is a little bit different than theirs. So you gotta be your own person and handle things in your own way. But having the ability to shoulder that responsibility and that stress and manage it is hopefully something that my children will have a part of their fabric as well.
Before we part, I just, I'm thinking back to sort of those leadership qualities and whatnot, and that we talked about earlier. And, there's been so much confusion surrounding this whole thing, and who to listen to, who's right, are the scientists right? Is the government right? Is my friend down the road right? You mentioned filtering out a lot of the sensationalism and just focusing on what was coming out of the government every day, let's say the administration, and just trying to stay on one track. How else do you do that when people are looking to you, and you need to be a voice of reason and calm, I guess, but you don't have all the facts, and everybody's looking around going, well, who do I listen to? Who do I trust? How else do you sort of find your lane that way?
Well, certainly people have different opinions, for sure. And people have different opinions at Triangle. So trying to take in as much feedback as I possibly could, understanding their perspectives, empathizing, knowing that some people will react differently, and just staying focused on, okay, I understand that this is the information that you have. This is the information that I have. This is what we're doing as an organization. And if we stayed focused on just, okay, this is what Triangle's doing, and tried to do our very best. The other thing too that I reminded people is nobody has the answer. This is a complete unknown and it's changing every day. So we'll respond as best we can to the information as it comes at us. But the reality was that nobody knew what was going on. And whether it was the government or it's the scientists or it's your friend down the street, everybody's got an opinion and we're all trying to figure this out together. So just be able to react and respond when it's necessary. And I think that reminding people that we were doing, this is what Triangle's doing and this is why we're doing it. And we'll, as more information comes out, we'll adapt and we'll change.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the most important thing as far as just leading an organization through this.
Yeah, good. Well, this has been great, Dax. I hope it was all right for you, and I hope folks listening and watching get something out of this. And again, an opportunity to look under a hood of a company this size and what we do and how we've managed to get through this thing.
Yeah,
and how we'll
thanks,
continue
Larry.
to manage to get through this thing.
Yeah, we will continue to get through it together. That's the most important thing. And I really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks, Larry.
Yeah, you too. I know you're busy. You got a lot going on. We
As
have
do
to
you.
get back after a week off. We have to get back to work now.
That's right. That's right.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Dax.
Thank you, Larry.